City Hall, and then also getting Ben out of the wastewater treatment plant up here into his own building. We talked about asking for, some questions for Mr. Peters financially, where we were and everything. And in order to do that, we needed to have a workshop. So that's what's gotten us where we're at this point. As we discussed before, Ben would like to get up here, and we need to maybe discuss again some of the options that we have on making that available to him. And then we need to discuss what are we going to do with City Hall. So with that being said, I will open the floor. Ben, do you want to chime in with anything at this point? Or?
No, not this time now.
I guess I'll, one of the options that, we could build a building over here, out back here where the detectives were for Ben. Basically, a 4,000 square foot building would be sufficient for their office and for growth, and could start there and then look at remodeling City Hall. And once you get into the renovation of this building, then we'll need to vacate it. And you're only talking Bob Strader's department. There's 3 there, Gary, Mac Dunn, Mac Porter, and myself to leave. So it's not that much of a disruption to getting us out here for this work to begin. So.
I guess, Jeff, I'd like to throw it out to you. I think the majority of the council was in favor of erecting a new building outside. That's the reason we bought all the properties around us several years ago. Our thoughts were to come up with a 2-story building with basement, combining our water department utility service in. So it would be a new edifice to match some of the other buildings around town. Naturally, the first question was, do we have financial means to do that? And at one time I was assured we did have with bonding. Then I've heard some reservations, so I'm not sure where we stand, but I guess financially, are we able to accomplish something like that? Now that would necessitate tearing down the existing building over there and building a new building.
Okay. Including the utilities complicates this. The 2 biggest complications are, 1, the Board of Works control over the sewage utility. If they don't want to issue bonds, we can't really enforce that issue. The other small complication with that is Ben and I talked about basic numbers where you guys had kind of thrown out a split between the clerk treasurer's office and then an equal split between electric and water. The utilities, because they're proprietary funds and operate as their own entities, they can only pay a proportionate share of a building. And when Ben and I talked about the numbers and how much of the building they would share, they would not be able to pay a quarter and a quarter of that building because they will not be utilizing that amount. So it would be a smaller amount than what you were previously talking about. So you either have to shrink the building or pick up the shortfall from the city side, and that would be subsidizing the utilities. The second problem with the utilities is the water utility that you have it regulated through the IURC. So it will have to go back to the IURC for approval to issue any additional debt, which would be very expensive for a small amount of debt. So I'm not sure that you want to do that. So with the utilities, that's kind of the problems I foresee. If you forget about the utilities, you have the ability that you can go issue lease rental bonds, just like you did for the police station. Those are unlimited, just based on taxpayer remonstrance. You can then levy taxes and pay property taxes to repay that debt service across up to a 20-year period for the bonds being outstanding, which because when you do the lease rental, just like with the police station, you cannot levy the property taxes to make principal and interest payments until such time as you can occupy the building. So that construction period, you borrow the interest payments of that up front and make those interest payments to bondholders while it's being constructed. Then you go to the taxpayers and ask for principal and interest across that last 19-year period or 18-and-a-half-year period, whatever it is. If I could kind of jump in here, I did want to update you kind of on a couple of thoughts about buildings and debt financing. You know, we've talked before about you have a general obligation bond cap, which is 1/3 of 2% of the AB in the city. And that amount today that's available is about $2.2 million. If all of your general obligation debt was paid off, it's, I think, about $3.5 million. So any project above that amount that you have to finance, you need to do it through a lease rental, and that's why we did the police station that way. So I would envision if you do a building like that, that's what you would do here. The overall debt service for the city at this point is, for 2025, I would estimate it to be about 40 cents. And your total tax rate's gonna be around like $1.44 or something. And that includes the new 2024 bonds that you just issued that you're gonna buy equipment for and then repay that in 25. When we get to 2026, the 22 RDC sewer bonds are gonna pay off. And the Civic Center, we plan on putting on the tax rates. But that 26 anticipated debt service rate is only about 18 cents, down from 40 cents. So you're gonna drop between 25 and 26, about 22 cents in tax rate, which you can do. As a fiscal body, you know, that'll be your decision as to whether you incur new debt or not. But the last time we had this discussion, I kind of felt like the consensus was maintain a fairly stable tax rate and undertake these projects that have been put off for years. So if you were to stay at that tax rate, you would need to put about 22 cents of debt on going forward in 26 and forward. If you did about a $6 million building, I added in what would be that capitalized interest period, issuance costs, things like that. I ballpark it at like $6,750,000 would be the amount you would finance. It would probably generate a rate of about 9 cents. So if you're trying to maintain that rate and you need to get to 22 cents, that would take you about halfway if you wanted to finance the entire thing. So if you want to go, and again, fully maintain your rate, then you need to also look at projects that you want to borrow money on in 25 that you can put on the 26 tax rate. Because that funding, again, if you start a project in 25 and it's going to be under construction during 26, we're not going to be able to put it on the tax rolls until 27, at least fully on the tax rolls in 27. We might get to get one payment in 26, depending on how the timing falls out, how long it takes to construct that building.
So you're saying for a $6.7 million project, figuring in the interest, we're only going to be about 9%, 9 cents on the tax rate.
Yes.
We have 22 coming down, so we've got, okay.
Yeah. So again, you know, if we're all under that same consensus before when we were talking about maintaining a fairly level tax rate and undertaking projects, you've got a lot to work with. There's quite a bit of money there in 22 cents that you can accomplish several projects. And, you know, again, depending on the projects that you want and how you want to fund them, if you wanted to take on that project and completely utilize that 22% or that 22-cent rate drop. We just shorten the amortization, and instead of 19 years, maybe we do, 10 or 9. Ups the payment, shortens the amount of the debt, saves interest as well,
And it keeps the tax rate low.
keeps the tax rate about where it's at.
Could we utilize some of the funds we have in our redevelopment commission to repay some of those things?
It has to be, and I'll defer to RDC's legal counsel, but it has to be related to the activities of the RDC. So like the bonds that were issued in 21 were used to fulfill your road commitments that you had with I-69 coming through. So it was fleshing out infrastructure for development purposes. The 21 RDC bonds were for sewage. So again, we're fleshing out utilities in order to set the stage for development, et cetera. A city building, I would venture to say that legal counsel will say no, you can't use RDC funds for a city building. But again, that's for the attorney to say what's allowed.
Can you explain the lease rental? Can you explain that?
Yeah.
A little more.
When we issue bonds, it's just like a borrowing, but rather than going to the bank, we sell $5,000 chunks of that debt to the public. And then we pay them principal and interest every 6 months, and they pay it back. So under that GO bond cap that you're allowed as a city, you cannot exceed that 1/3 of 2%. So the answer to that, because lots of units of government like you, probably every school in the state, cannot build the facilities they need to operate under that 1/3 of 2% cap. So the legislature provides a mechanism where you can do a lease rental. So you establish a building corporation, which you already have, and which leases the police station. So the building corporation actually issues the bonds, not the city. The city and the building corporation that have a lease, where one occupies and one pays, you as the city then, to meet your lease obligation to the building corporation, you impose property tax on your taxpayers, collect that money, make your lease payment. The building corporation then pays the bondholders. So the building corporation is actually the bond issuer, and that's how you get around that cap.
Is the police department the only facility in that bond corporate, or that building corporation?
You have another one?
Would the fire station been on that?
I'm kind of thinking the police station's the only one. Now, you had a lease before that. Was that the building you sold?
Yes, Rogers Block Plan,
Okay.
yes.
So, yeah, that Rogers building, I think, was part of the building corp. The police station is, but I think that's the only one.
So it's not like a new entity for each?
That would be a legal question, but no, typically we just continue to add leases to the same building corporation if it's the same geography.
So the building corporation is the bondholder? Is that
They're the bond issue.
the bond issuer? So how are they financed?
They don't get paid, they don't get anything. They're really just a conduit to take the payment, make the payment. There is a little bit of an operating fund there, but it's typically to pay legal counsel if there are any legal issues regarding that entity. And if we have to do an arbitrage calculation, which is when you issue municipal bonds, you are only to issue the amount that you need, and you are not to invest those proceeds so that they unjustly generate a huge profit. They don't want you borrowing money tax exempt at 3.5% and investing it at 7% for perpetuity and keeping it. You can do that temporarily while you're building the project, but if you exceed certain amounts, you'll have to calculate the amount that you're not allowed under federal law to keep and give it back. That calculation is fairly expensive, and if they have to do that, if they haven't met certain requirements, then they would pay that out of that operating fund. But it's really pretty much a wash, and if we get to the end of
It is just the one. I verified it.
So,
Can you explain again on the Board of Works, why that was complicating things?
The Board of Works, you decide as the fiscal body, the approval of debts that would be proposed for the civil city. The Board of Works controls the sewage works. And those are different bonds. Those are not put on the property taxpayers. They are a revenue bond based on future revenue streams and rates that are imposed. Now, do you guys have a utility service board or, okay, so not having the utility service board, you as the fiscal body set the rates for the sewage utility. So
Is that
you would
based
be part
on
of-
the bond repayment that they're?
Well, typically that's one of the components when we look at the rate. We want to see what does it cost to operate and what outstanding debts do we have going forward. And then if those need to be adjusted, come to the fiscal body and say, here should be the rates of the sewage utility in order to meet all these obligations. However, my understanding is for the sewer to actually issue debt on that revenue stream, they would be required as the Board of Works to initiate and start that, and I don't believe that they're inclined to.
What's their current bond? Do they have any bonds that are about to drop off?
They do, they're going to drop off, and what typically happens in that scenario is the rate structure stays the same, and then you accumulate money and start to do projects, pay as you go with cash, if you can. If it comes to the point where they can't meet those infrastructure obligations, then they may need to issue additional revenue bonds.
But if they fall off and they don't have projects, wouldn't that put them in that surplus dollar amount that you were just kind of talking about with the building corporation?
No, because those aren't debt funds.
Okay.
Those are revenues of the sewage utility. They are restricted and required to be used for the benefit of the sewage utility, but they can accrue indefinitely. Now, they won't, because, we all know how old the sewage utility is, and it will have things that break, things that need to be repaired and maintained. So, yeah, as the system ages, those monies always get eaten up.
Sorry about that, had a little problem work.
and to kind of go back on the sewer funds, we received the ARPA money from the county, $1.5 million for some extension of some stuff. And we were talking earlier today with Troy and Gary and Dale, looking at extending the sewer and what we're going to do over here at Faith Church's property that's in the city, and Arbor Homes is looking to come in that area. So, we've got some funds now in our wastewater plant that we'll use with those funds we received from the county to be able to run service over to the east side.
Now, the county gave us money too for that, correct?
$1.5 million.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
And what was the issue with the utilities, the payment of
The payment is, the utilities can only pay the proportionate share of the building they would be using, because they operate basically as a proprietary entity or as a business entity. So the original numbers that Ben and I talked about was going to be 50% clerk treasurer, 25% water, 25% sewer. Well, when we talked about how much of that space would they actually physically occupy, it was only like 17 or 12 and a half.
I think 17.5%.
Something like that. So they would only be eligible to pay whatever that proportionate share of the building was. So you couldn't split it to 6 million, $1.5 million, or 3 million, $1.5 million, $1.5 million. So you either have to shrink the whole project, which then again, they're bound to a percentage. which just makes it go down. Or, as the city, you could pay for the excess, put them in there, but then you'll be somewhat subsidizing the water and sewer utility. And the other problem with the water utility is the IURC regulation. I think you'll find it would be very expensive to go back through that IURC process and cumbersome to borrow a small amount of money.
Do they pay rent to the city? Like a rent? You know, instead of just flat out subsidizing, since it's looked at as a business entity, wouldn't they pay like a rent to be in that space? Like a lease, not a lease, but you know, some, to make
yes,
it more,
we would.
to make it more clean of a.
I would want legal counsel to advise us if the IURC would take exception to that. You're right, if it was just a rent expense, that should fly. But will they deem it by taking on a new building and having a rent expense or a lease in perpetuity, that it's really debt that you avoided going back to them for their approval? You know, regulatory agencies a lot of times are very testy about
Sure.
what they control or what they think they control.
It's just a question.
And
Yeah, and again, you know, we can flesh that out, because I did think about that, whether that would be an idea of how to get around that and just make rental payments based on a certain formula and not issue the debt from that side. So therefore, you would issue the debt on behalf of the city, you would use rent revenue from sewer and water to buy down that amount of actual amount you need to make the payment, which would then lower the amount that you put other taxpayers to collect.
But with the IURC, we just went through that, what, in 19, when we did the major water. So at that point with the IURC, the water utility had no rental expense. And they're just, I mean, yeah, they're making ends meet, but they're not generating a huge revenue. So if we started charging them any kind of a rental expense, then they're going to be back in the red.
Potentially, then you, have to go
Back to the
back to the
IURC.
IURC to adjust the rates in order to set them. Now, we haven't gone to the extent of doing that dive into the revenue structure of that, but you're right, that's very possible.
Well, Ben and I talked a couple times about, you know, an option would be to just, you know, come over and build a 4,000 square foot building, 4,200 square feet, no basement, because we're sitting on a hot spot with the plume anyway. So do you really want to dig down and open up a basement that now you're going to have special ventilation in? They can have plenty of storage in a one-story building over here and leave the utility office where it's at and then come in and redo the city hall.
Do we have a projected cost on that option?
I mean, if you did a single floor building, that would be, we didn't really bid it or get a hard number on it. So the two-story building with the basement, we're looking at about $6 million. So
What was that?
the two-story building with the basement was quoted, rough estimate, as $6 million all in. So a single floor with no basement would be less than $3 million at that point.
Wouldn't you have to remediate? I mean, I could be wrong, but you know, concrete is porous. If you built on top of a known plume site, wouldn't you have to remediate that anyway before doing new construction over the top of it?
You would not have to remediate it. If you did slab construction, you would not have to remediate anything. If you did a crawl space, yeah, you'd have to do remediation, put a vapor extraction system in for a crawl space, but those are hundreds of dollars, not big dollars.
So what would be in the 4,000, no basement, one floor building? Not the water, because water's gonna stay there, correct, with that option? What would be in that building? Clerk's office, clerk all the clerk people and their files? Just that?
Just that.
Okay. And when we were talking the three-story building, basement, 2 other stories, 6 million, what were we talking about moving in there? Water and what else?
It's gonna be the water utility office, court services, and then my office.
And you can put your building inspector or building enforcement, I mean,
Yeah, you could.
free up more room for who's here for the mayor's office and Gary's office, Matt's office.
So court services okay to stay here then?
I mean, that's really up to you all.
Well, aren't we getting rid of court services?
I know it's been discussed.
That's a discussion you need to have.
Today?
It's not set for this workshop today.
Oh,
But that is something that is within the prerogative of the council, and there has been some of the council that I've had some discussions with about that topic. So that's probably something that does need to be discussed, whether or not you want to do that or not.
If you go remodeling here too, though, you have offices in here, what would we do with a council and stuff, where we have the meetings if we're remodeling this?
That would be pretty easy. We just go to the Civic Theater. You'd have a stage and you have a 300-seat auditorium for people to sit in. And we would just block those, the second and fourth Mondays over there.
That'd just be a temporary thing.
Right. Because if you renovate City Hall, you're going to bring your council chambers back in here.
so do we have the money now to do a 4,000 square foot, 1-story? I mean, do we have funds right now just to get it on a timeline and expedite it, get it finished?
For that, for that project alone, yes, you would have the cash available in your municipal building fund.
So what's your mental timeline wish to moving out of where you're at to get over to a new
What,
facility?
three weeks ago?
Thanksgiving would have been great.
Is there gonna be a buffer place in between, or are you gonna stay there until something's built?
My thought is we just stay where we're at currently until something is built.
So the other options that we've talked about, the B&B, that's out, other homes are out. Well, right now, we're just looking at the one option.
Yeah, my understanding that was the council's appetite was to build a new building, so.
And do we have,
But
but we don't know the cost.
I just, no, I mean, we definitely need to get the costs. I just kind of have a hard time swallowing paying that amount for just one office in there. I just, I mean, it's understandable with $5 million at the police station, which it's over, but that's encumbering a lot of things and offices, and, that's a big unit. I just,
If you do the rough numbers, 4,000 square feet, $500 a square, that's $2 million.
Let me offer, I love to build, but let me offer a contrary opinion. This building is 6,000 square foot plus. We're not gonna have anybody in it, but half a dozen people if we do all this. Do we need another roof to maintain? Do we need another kingdom to start? Do we need those kind of things to happen? I personally don't believe so. It's a big job to remodel this building. It'll be a big challenge. It'll cost twice what it'll build a new one someplace. But this has an important architecture and historic nature to the city, so I think that our populace would prefer to us stay in this building. But to build something else and have half of this sit empty or 2/3 of it sit empty makes no sense to me.
Good point. So keeping court services here and the offices that are already here, not having the police station offers more opportunity for like offices to be included here, maybe another conference room or whatever is needed, storage.
What's wrong with my conference room? I like that.
I
I
love
like
it.
that high table.
It has personality.
My knees do not like your conference table.
The only thing I wish is that we could put the water company in with the new building. Because then it would be a new structure over there instead of having an old one, a new one, a remodeled one. And, you know, it would be more condensed, streamlined, they'd all be in one spot.
Let me ask Jeff this question. What if you put the utility into City Hall? Does that change things?
I don't think it matters where you put them, it just matters how much do you want them to pay and for what.
But if they came into City Hall, would they really have to pay? I mean,
And that's my point, yeah. If they don't have to pay, they're just saying you will be located here. You know, I think that's a wash, because they already have a building, a place that they work that's paid for. It's just when we incur debt, if you want to individually incur debt from either sewer or water, there are complications that go along with that.
But don't we have to maintain that building, right? Even though it's
Right,
paid for, we have to
and that's part of
maintain
their
it.
budget and part of their current rates.
Okay.
So that operates and maintains that structure.
What is that maintenance? Do we know what that set aside maintenance is for that structure?
Oh, it's pretty minimal. I mean, they have, you know, your basic furnace service and, you know, if the furnace breaks, they fix it. Roof maintenance. I mean, it's
I don't know if it's
less than $10,000 annual. So.
yeah, say it was just repainted and recarpeted within the last 2 or 3 years. Put a new window and door in there, and it was less than 20,000, wouldn't it have been?
Yeah, yeah. It was.
It's not.
Well, maybe I'm the only one with the opinion, maybe we should keep it there. I mean, if it's been updated or refurbished in such a way and people are comfortable there and it's fitting our need and it's not that much of an expense for maintenance, maybe it's more practical and reasonable to keep it there. I just was thinking aesthetically, you know, for our community, because since our downtown has become a focal and, you know, the venue is beautiful, the new buildings are beautiful. I didn't know if, you know, we're upgrading back here if we want to have a nice parking lot or something. I don't know.
So I apologize, I know I probably listened to that late, I'm sorry, but, so we can't use water sewer bond to assist with personality if we were moving the water department in it?
The sewer bond, we think would have to be initiated through the Board of Works, and they're not inclined to. The water bond would require approval from the IURC, which would be expensive and cumbersome. Probably you wouldn't want to spend the amount of time and money to get through that process for a small amount of bond.
What do you mean the Board of Works is not inclined to? What's that mean? The ones on Board of Works have something against that idea?
I understood that they do not want to issue any additional bonded debt at this time.
If they had rationale that would be such that it would be a good time for our city to do that, I mean, if we talked to them and worked together, collaborated, if that is what we all think is best, maybe someone can talk to the Board of Works, whoever that spokesperson is that's saying it's not a good idea.
But we'll read the bond, I mean, we're not just gonna let the bond drop off, right?
For
When
the-
they're done.
Yeah, there's a bond dropping off,
But
This
we'll,
month.
we'll add on to that, won't we?
not necessarily, I don't know what I can say to y'all, I can't.
Well,
Because there was an executive session with the
Yeah.
Board of Works.
I guess what we could say right now is the Board of Works has indicated they have no desire at this point to additionally bond right now. So the bond will fall off, and then they will just start accumulating the cash that they were paying towards the bond into the utility. And then right now, their idea would be that they would pay as they go. So if you're gonna be, for instance, do some sewer lining, we'll accumulate cash and we'll do lining as we can pay for it with cash, as opposed to issuing new
But
bonds.
won't that be showing a profit then if they're?
But they can show a profit.
What percentage, what percentage of the, you know, the rates versus the bond? What's that look like in terms of profit margin?
Well, my understanding is that when the bond falls off, they will be basically able to garner about 500 grand a year. So $500,000 a year. Cash.
Would people not throw a fit that we're making a profit and then we want the rates lowered? I mean, which we don't want to lower rates, but you don't want to go through that and go up and down.
Is there a limit to the IURC on the maximum profit margin that the utility?
There is in the IURC, but the sewer utility is not under IURC.
So it's like 50% of that.
Say again.
Is it 50% then? Is it half? So you sewer's half and water's half?
No, the water itself is under IURC regulation. The sewer is not. It's just under your regulation and Board of Works. So even if they would show profit year to year, if they accumulated that $500,000 for 3 years and then did $1.5 million sewer lining project, which I have utilities that do that very thing. They save it because they can't get a good bid on a $500,000 project, but they can get a good bid on a $1.5 million project. They accumulate that money for 3 years and then spend it. Therefore, there's not really any profit. They're continuing to put it back into the infrastructure to repair and maintenance. Now, the problem arises when they realize that they may need $3 million of a project, 2 years from now. Then they'll be forced to issue bonds in order to raise $3 million and then pay that back over time.
So let's say we get a lot of these other homes built, and we've got to, expand this stuff. That's going to be a problem 10 years down the road, potentially, where you need to go bond to build,
Part of
bigger
it depends on
infrastructure.
the capacity of the plant and the infrastructure to get that sewage from wherever it is that you're building down to the plant. And eventually, your plant will wear out and you'll have to revamp it, which will be tens of millions of dollars.
And Troy Swan's here this afternoon, and he has been looking at that and has a guesstimation about how many homes we have to bring in before we would get to a level where we'd be getting, where we needed to do something with the plant. And we've had that discussion.
What's that number, Troy? What do you think?
Well, we didn't pull the DMR, but every house you have, your add-on is about 300 gallons per day, on average per day, with a peaking value goes into that. Look at your MROs in the past, you're in a pretty good spot. But without giving a number, you can add substantial housing without impacting capacity from the aggregated load.
I'm sorry, how many did you say?
I didn't give an exact number, I would have to pull together some data, but we've looked at it in the past, and it's not like you're on the threshold of getting to that point. You can add houses, and every subdivision that comes on has to have a sewer allocation letter signed to show you where you're at versus where they're gonna add on to, and you have to show the item that you got the capacity to take that treatment. So far, any subdivision you got right now is just fine. So as far as the lots that are being developed today, you have more than enough capacity to take that, and there's residential subdivisions proposed or in the works probably that would be not having a problem with all of them.
So what's our utilization rate currently?
I think we're really right around 50%.
We're 49% right now.
And with the lining and everything else that's taking place, the relocation to the sewer around I-69, you reduce the I&I, which is brought down your body capacity as well. That's why I haven't looked at those numbers since all that's gone on. So you have a peaking factor that's coming down, which helps.
So 6 months back, we began to look at what we're gonna do here, and I'm contacted with Banning Engineering to do a review of the conditions that we have, the depths that they were at, likely costs reflected in that. And at that point, we were talking about maybe doing $4 or $5 billion worth of sewer lining work, what Jeff referred to as the change in the attitude of the Board of Works. We're not gonna do that much, but we're still gonna do the analysis, and we're gonna continue with the camera operations. We just okayed the contract for that too. So we'll get a better understanding of what we have, a better understanding of where the specific need is on a limited basis. So if we do $1.5 million over the next year plus, and another $1 million the next year, we'll be able to address the need. We just need to spread it out a little bit. You'll pay a little bit more for that because a larger project brings you better cost functions per foot of lining that you're going to do, but we can still address that as well. Again,
So
to Troy's point.
But if you do pay as you go, you don't get necessarily, it's not like one contract, so you don't get the economies of scale, say, and do the whole thing.
And to Troy's point, every bit of that lining that we do, it generally increases the capacity of what our plant is at that to be able to accept. So if we're good, in round numbers, we thought we were at 60%. We can continue to drive that down because we'll get rid of the infiltration from storms and the water systems. And why it just behooves us to keep making that advantage because, as Jeff indicated, adding to our sewage treatment plant, rebuilding one is $20–30 million probably at least. So they're really exorbitantly expensive.
But again, the reason for this meeting is talking about some buildings, not sewer linings. So.
Do we have any planned usage for the garage area where the firehouse used to be? I mean, is it just storage? Is that what it plans on being here going forward, or office spaces, or?
Well, as soon as the police get out, we're hoping to come through and clean everything and just kind of have an idea. I mean, once you start working on City Hall, all of a sudden you have to meet all the ADA requirements. You know, running a ramp out into the garage is going to eat up a lot of that area. So, Ben, I don't know if an architect's given any indication what you could use that for or not.
But see, could we not then get some of the public offices, do like the county's done? I mean, they're basically trying to take the foot traffic away from over there because they can't meet that requirements. That's why they did their annex and putting up the government legal building, whatever. Forget me what was the proper name. Can we not do that by? That's what I'm saying. I just have a hard time just putting one office over there. You put the other's office and get more sort of foot traffic over there. We wouldn't have to accommodate all that.
And Ben, you're our ADA person. Is it my understanding that we just have to make ADA compliance available that is used for the public?
Correct.
So if the garage and all that was just for storage,
I'm just asking, I'm new here, so kind of learning things.
Yeah, your garage and then that half of the second floor will be problematic with ADA. We've had 4 architects look at it and all 4 said the same thing, that garage area, and then that half of the building is just gonna be
That's
difficult.
why I was thinking putting those other offices over there, it would be, or, you know, we had talked over the years past about, you know, catwalks and that, and we talked about that ADA problems. Nice, much we need to get people upstairs for the, here, as I think what was the complaint was there was no 2 exits up here, is that correct? And that's why I was thinking, you know, with that new building, then you can address those issues. You know, if you move the council over there, to the courtrooms, then you're not worrying about the 2 exits. You know, you take care of that in that construction. But I thought that was one of the reasons why we couldn't, when we talked about doing it, add on, because we had to have 2. If we made the changes, we had to add that.
I'm for the original, you know, what we discussed originally, which was water office in the clerk's office, 2-story basement. Constantly running out of space, you know, different departments moving around, things like that. It's never gonna be cheaper than it is now.
But then what are you gonna do with this building?
I thought we discussed renovating it.
But I don't think you got enough money to spend $6 million on a 2-story, or might as well say a 3-story building, then come in and renovate this.
But we wouldn't have to renovate right away, right? I mean,
Well, let me put it this way. I will veto anything that goes through that doesn't have the renovation of this in it. And I know you can override my veto, and that's fine. But I'm gonna stand firm that you've gotta have a plan to do something with City Hall. It's been pushed down the road too long that it needs to be addressed.
oh, I know that, that's why
Yeah.
I complained about it. We got the things backwards what we originally planned on. And we
But
got-
I
2019, I think, is what the date was when we started. Maybe before that, I can't remember when we were talking about.
Yeah, well, I mean, the very beginning, the plans, the long terms, back in
Even
his
further.
administration, you know, what they want to do and add on here, take care of that, and
But
then
you,
because of,
you see where we're at, and
No, I know.
nothing's ever been done.
right,
So-
which we're making that progress now, that's what I'm saying, I'm glad we are, and that's why I say with the progress, I don't know, and that's just me. I just have a hard time putting up a new building, it'd just be for one office, and then it's not gonna have enough. I just don't see how you have enough room if we need space for other things to be put in, where it seems like we're constantly always moving things around and moving to other locations. That's just my thoughts.
Do we have a renovation estimate of what we want to do here, who we want to include here?
Well, it's anywhere from $3 million to $4 million to $6 million. I mean,
Depending,
yeah, because nobody knows what they're gonna get into until they actually start. That's the scary part of it all.
What would it cost to have someone come in here and look? I mean, I know, like you say, until you get into it, you don't know what you're gonna get into. But to move offices around to where we want them and things like that. I'm with Gary. I don't want to see this one sit empty. I mean, I'm an antique guy. I like old things. But I'm with Phil there too. I don't see building a 1-floor building for one office. Even if we don't build in the 2nd floor, I feel like it should be built for future use to happen if we need it. But I definitely want to see this redone moving forward. If you don't put it in the plans like Kenny says, then it'll kick down the road again.
if we remodel this, can we put the clerk's office in here and just make this the project? I mean, I don't know. Because this is, has historic and endearments, and people are, you know, embrace the building, the structure, what it represents for our community. And with the police moving out, can the clerk's office staff move in here? If we're thinking keeping the water group over there is good, keep them over there, put clerks in here, and remodel in here.
Years ago, one of the original plans, it says it started out as thought, I mean, that's why, when they wound up, it went the route of getting Chrysler Square, then that's why it was remodeled in the front to move the clerk's office over there and remodel City Hall and then add on. And to get the spaces all over here and then create parking back over there. So that was one of the options that had originally, but that was, again, that's just been a temporary thing, and like I said, the police went ahead and moved to the backup side of it, utilized it, and then nothing was done, it deteriorated, and we end up now in a building there, and moved the clerks down the sewage treatment plant. But that was original, was to remodel City Hall and add on to expand it.
Is that something that sounds appealing to clerk's office or to the mayor's office? I mean, is that something that you would want to explore?
And that was one of the options that we offered to you all, and that was a little bit more expensive in that. So, yeah, we could revisit that if that's everybody.
And what kind of, Susie, I was talking about, when we're talking about expansion, because then that's when they got into, well, ADA, we're going to put in another entrance for upstairs, because with the public coming in, and once you remodel, you got to have a second exit. So that's why then it became, let's put a separate freestanding building over here, get some else out of there. You know, whatever worked. I mean, I think each time it's been governed by what the requirements are of ADA and everything else, but I have no problem doing that, remodeling here. I mean, that's why we purchased this ground, to expand City Hall, make a bigger area, give us a parking lot over there, and keep parking on one side, and building everybody over on one side.
What was the price on that? I think we let you submitted it to us. It was.
Yeah, I think the estimation was right at 8 million for the whole project.
Because they'd also talked about that fire bathing out there, but starting on the alley, is putting the water department on that side of the City Hall, so you continue with your drive-through.
And then you'd also have to, if I remember right, it's been a while since I've looked at it, you'd have to move these utilities that are right here.
Utilities, and that was the other things that came into play, along with the ADA things, so then they, different administrations come up with, let's do a freestanding building then, and incorporate the water department, and put a new building over there, so. I do understand, I'm with Kenny, it's been a long time, like I said, this is my 6th term, and it keeps going down, but we gotta do it, because I know they're already, again, that's why, and I apologize to the firemen then, so they know I wasn't against them. When we built that, it's a beautiful building, we should have scaled down and across the highway, already had our substation, police and fire over there, and we'd be okay, because now they're already wanting a new fire station over to handle that, and more and more is coming, and if we don't do this and get this taken care of, it's not gonna happen.
So is the next step for then there to be a proposal on the agenda and then we just vote for it?
That's what I would say. Let's get it on as an agenda item, the first meeting in January. We can have more discussion. We can get voted on what we're going to do, which way we want to go. That would be my recommendation.
I mean, is it gonna be an agenda item where there's options, or an agenda item with the city proposes this, and then someone makes a motion for it to carry through?
Well,
What's the-
I'm going to ask Dale and Ben what legally, my thought is, put it on the agenda item, bring it up for discussion, and maybe we don't vote on it right then if nobody is comfortable with what decisions are made, but we've got to bring it up front and start discussing it. But again, if we bring it up at the meeting, then we're gonna talk about it, and it's crickets, that's gonna be kind of embarrassing too.
Well, I mean, we've had several
Yeah, we've been talking about it, so
Yeah.
talking about this.
that's why I'm wondering if we just have, if you guys, if you as the city leaders know what you want as a proposal, because that's your vision, then should you put that on the agenda as wanting to move forward with it? And then it's either voted on as yay or not? Or is that too risky, not knowing?
You're part of that leadership.
Yeah, you're guiding the money, honey.
Oh, we know that, but don't we make motions on what's on the agenda. We don't always come up with the agenda items.
But you can. We can put it on the agenda to.
So then, should we put the various options on the agenda and then vote for those and maybe prioritize, or like you said, have a discussion publicly to rank or prioritize or give streaks, or, I mean, we've got to find a way to narrow it down if it's not going to just be on the agenda to vote yes or no, right?
But,
Right.
yeah, and I think that was part of the hope of this workshop, is to kind of narrow that scope down, you know, because ultimately it's going to be your call on where.
So if we put the clerk's office in City Hall, isn't it gonna save money?
You're still gonna have to remodel and expand, because you're bringing more people back in, and the storage space that they need is not. That's why we're gonna expand it or add the freestanding, because they have, their storage space has gotten smaller since they're digitalizing things. But they still have a lot of spaces. You have, how many employees now?
There's 5 of us total.
5 people. I mean, you know, Gary sits in an office that 3D Texas, we shared that office, and the fire chief and the chief shared the next one, which isn't even bigger than the restroom. They expanded that area just to give him that office. You know, and I've just always told that the building going out there, that it can't take a whole lot more, so there's a lot to do to it, and that's why we're taking into consideration those things. But, you know, to bring the clerk's office back here at this point, I mean, you've got to overhaul this. And if you're going to do that, you need to do everything, and I think that includes the water department. And
But it sounds like we can't do anything with the water department,
Yes,
because,
you can.
and then what, we would just charge them, like charge rent?
Potentially. We would have to see what the IURC would say to that. But yes, theoretically, you should be able to charge them some sort of rent for being in the office, in the same building.
But yet, if it's the city utility, and you read in everything, just bring them in, because the bond that we're going to get has no bearing on the revenue of them.
Yeah, the bond will have to exclude them as they're pledging revenue. Otherwise, you'll have to go to the IURC in advance of any of your project and get their approval, which is expensive, time consuming. You probably won't want to do that.
Okay, so,
Because their portion will be a very small portion of the whole building.
right, so we would not include that rental fee or whatever, lease fee, whatever, right? We would have to accommodate what they need, but not with the idea that we'd be getting revenue from them.
I would say if you want to include them, yes, include them. Do not count on any money for them or bonding for them. Just you're going to subsidize them unless they can pay something under the IURC.
Okay.
So let's do this. Let's put it on the agenda for the first meeting in January. We will come with some thoughts, 2 or 3 different options. We'll have discussion, and if there's not a firm decision, then we'll bring it on the next council meeting. We'll just keep bringing it up until we get it hashed out, because again, we have an executive session. We can talk amongst ourselves, but we really, you know, we can't get information from Jeff or anything like that. So now if we bring it out publicly, now we can talk more open about what we want to do and what's going to be best.
So if we would include them, we would have to have a large bond to redo this with the clerk's office?
Well, if the clerk's office was going to cost you $4 million, just picking a number, and renovate this was 6, so you were at 10 million. So if to add on and renovate this is 8, you're still less than what you would have paid for, and you just got one rooftop.
One rooftop and less than what you would have been.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there's always a but. You know, you just, once they get into this, I mean, we felt like the bones of this structure should be pretty good, but there may be a surprise. But on the same token, we're talking about bonding for all of it. We still have $3 million in cash that if something did come up, we could help cover part of that.
And typically when we do that bond structure, you have the engineers come in, develop that estimate of what the cost is. They'll put in a contingency factor. Because of this building, it'll probably be a bigger contingency factor. So you'll borrow that. You can keep that $3 million in reserve to find or address anything unrelated. The other thing that we talked about with the lease rental is you cannot make principal and interest payments off the property taxes during the construction period. I assume renovating this is going to be a longer time period than the new structure. So, you know, maybe it will be the 27 tax rolls, hopefully not all the way to 28. But again, you have the ability to do that as part of that lease rental structure.
That comes back to a question you said we're at 40 cents tax and we're gonna lose 22 cents?
Yes,
Well,
because on your debts, you are only allowed to levy the amount of property tax needed to make the next principal and interest payments, and you have debts that are falling off at 26. The GO bonds you just issued in 24 all pays off in 25, and the 22 RDC bonds that were put on the property tax rolls expire in 25. So you're going to lose about 22 cents net of that tax rate when we go into 26. And to get debt service on the 26 tax rolls, you'll have to bond that debt and have it closed by the end of 25 in order to levy taxes in 26 toward the repayment.
That's what I was concerned with, is losing that tax revenue.
What was the rate in 2019, 2020?
2019 was 1.535, so 1.54.
And then the rates in 22 were 1.4949. That was right before you got the big increase in assessed
So we're
value.
looking about the same.
That dropped. Yeah, and that was kind of the discussion we had before, you know, let's kind of stay around that amount and undertake projects. But yeah, alternatively, you can let it go down, but again, that doesn't address all the projects.
You gotta come back and,
Yes.
I mean, these are not unnecessary projects. You know, this is like necessary things.
Yeah, I've never met a unit of government that didn't have more projects than they have now.
Right.
So you're gonna come up with 3 options or 2 options, something like that? And we're gonna see those before the meeting and I guess I'm gonna say, we really need to look at them before we get here. We're gonna have to vote on them.
Well, we're going to discuss it.
Well, okay.
You know, again, this is a huge step for our city. And it's a huge step for the council to say, you know, this is what we want to do. I don't want to come to one meeting and say, make a vote tonight, guys. No, we're going to discuss it, and it may take 3 meetings before we come back, but I don't want to put it off.
And we're gonna get a lot of discussion after that first meeting from our constituents, so we'll hear back from them.
Which-
Go ahead, sorry.
Which is what we need.
Yeah,
Correct. And since we have someone in charge of the EDA, and you're going to look at that in these proposals, correct?
Yep.
Because like I said, that was one of the things that, why we went to that freestanding, is because of the plan of that, not being able to have the public as their second exit out here.
I think one of the study in 18 or 19, whichever it was, they had a fire escape right there.
Yeah. Because it was a big ordeal when we had the elevators on.
And so who trumps who, okay? Does putting a fire escape out here doesn't go with the Historical Society, but meets ADA? Who trumps who?
I'd say ABA.
Yeah, that,
I would assume so, but.
probably ADA, but that's,
Okay.
that'll be a fun one. So does everyone want me to email them the options? Because we have them now, so I could email them within the next 15 minutes, so. It's the same options we've been talking about, so.
But you don't have an option of expanding this, do you? Oh, do you? Okay. I can't remember, I'm sorry, I've seen a number of plans, and I don't remember, as you know, the first set, I don't know where they were at. I know Eric Ratz, they were part of that group, but we've had a few different people designing for us.
Well, let's get that sent out. We'll put it on the agenda for the first meeting, and we'll start our discussions.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Keith, thank you for being here this afternoon.